Tuesday was Election Day in Pennsylvania. Though that's not the news. The news, for me, was about the news. Very meta, I know. The Philadelphia Inquirer couldn't bring itself to endorse a Republican. For the editorial board, justifiably, the threshold for doing so was that we're all operating in the same reality. But such isn't the case right now. The paper asked, how do you find points of agreement when you can't reach common ground on facts so basic? I needed some fresh air, and went for a walk. On my sidewalk, in my own thoughts, I noticed a sign in someone's window and my attention turned to it, a topic no less heavy. I took this with my very own camera phone. Racism is a sin. But while pulling out my phone, I stumbled on an uneven piece of concrete, something that wasn't lost on me. Unlike the actual concrete beneath me, this sign, although resonate for sure, lacks a concrete quality. I mean, I doubt a racist would think that was meant for them. You see, racists rarely think they're sinning in such a way, because if you ask a racist if they're racist, they almost certainly say no. The Inquirer's onto something. The same goes for abortion, and for all those abortion is a sin signs. I mean, I'd scoff at an abortion sign like that. Not because I've had an abortion, but because for me, abortion doesn't qualify as a sin. And just because conservatives, the same ones who hypocritically toss around terms like life and sanctity, claim to have proprietorship over what counts as a sin or not, doesn't mean that comports with reality. So the abortion debate rages on. One side talking past the other. Conservatives talk about the will of God, while advocates for reproductive autonomy talk about living women. These are the starting points as far apart as ever, still lacking necessity a common origin from which to then depart as required for an actual good faith debate. Conservatives make gestures of concern over an embryo, but this isn't the origin source on which they claim moral authority. It's God, they'll say. Or their version anyway. It's because they're a real person of faith, as they so often say, a true believer of the religious text, and that other so-called believers are frauds. Not really one of them, but whom, other than themselves, anointed them to speak on behalf of the one single version of what is moral. I mean, if you ask just about any person who self-identifies as religious whether they think they're a good practitioner of their faith or not, they'll all, of course, say yes. Just like if you ask a person if they're racist, the answer is almost always and undoubtedly, of course not me. Which takes us back to the source of the problem. We lack common ground. Because we lack agreement on the most important definitions. What is racism? Who is religious? So instead of asking people of faith if they're sufficiently religious, to which they will almost always say yes, you can get a better sense of their religiosity by asking a different question. A question like, how many times do you go to your place of worship? The former is too abstract, too much room for projection. The latter, though, is much more concrete. The person who attends, say, Mass on Christmas and Easter for a total of 2 times a year has a different religiosity index than someone who attends prayer services and Bible study multiple times a week. This is an effective tool for decentering people in service of avoiding baseless projection. Something like the role of religion in their life is no longer measured in naive intuition, but by a concrete set of actual, measurable practices. The ability to get context matters. Data suggests that for some morally opposed to abortion, at least in the abstraction as a part of a political ideology, would be inclined to help a loved one get one. Because for them, and unlike the sign carriers, it's become a rank-ordered choice based on real, concrete alternatives. Actual life choices of the woman are centered, rather than the outsider's moral theory of the universe. Support rises. A more nuanced approach to specific circumstances increases the pro-choice position. We now have a starting point, and have an actual place from which to engage, a loved one. Now, how do more of us become loved ones? Though the real-life stories who unequivocally support a woman's full autonomy over pregnancy-related choices are informed by a more complex and concrete set of experiences.